YouTube, I'm going to give you 3 amazing effects to use for Brutalist design work in Photoshop, so let's jump straight into it. Okay, so the first effect I'm going to show you here is bitmapping. So now bitmapping refers to a color mode which can represent and display images in only black and white pixels. So now doing this creates this kind of hard-edged visual, and I'm going to show you here on this image. So I've got my image layer here, and I'm going to come up to image, mode, and grayscale. Now it's going to prompt you to flatten your layer, which is going to combine your image in the background, which is fine. And then I'm going to come on to image mode again and select bitmap. Now here you're going to be asked to put in your output resolution. Now the higher this number is, the more dense and the smaller the actual bitmap markings are going to be. So I'm going to use quite a low number for the time being because I'm using a big canvas. So I'm just going to input 20 here. And now the method, you're going to have a few different options here that are going to produce different results. I'm sticking with halftone screen for this example. So I'm going to press OK. And now on the frequency and the angle, I'm going to keep them the same. And you can change your shape here of whether you'd like it to be circles, diamonds, lines, squares, crosses. Play around with these and see what you like, but I'm going to use square for the time being. So now when I press OK, you're going to notice that the canvas is going to get a lot smaller. This is completely fine, but now as I zoom in, you see this image is now completely made up of black and white squares. So when I zoom out, all of the detail is kept. It looks like the full image. It looks as if there is a combination of white, black, and grey in there, but that's simply because of density. So you can see here there is just these small crosses, and then once you add in the thicker sections, you get the darker color. Now from this point, because you've got such a small canvas, you want to retrieve it to the normal size. So if you come onto image and image size, so I'm going to set my image size back to 3840 and 4800, and then when I zoom out, I have my image retrieved in the full size. So now from here, you can come back into image and mode, select grayscale, and then image mode again, and put it back into RGB color. So now from this point, what you might want to do is separate the black and the white so that you can recolor it. So if you come over to your channels panel on the layers over here, you have your red, green, and blue, and your general RGB layer. If you command click on this RGB layer, it's going to highlight all of the white areas. So now if I was to unlock this and select mask, you're going to notice that the only areas visible now are these white squares. So if I was to then add a fill background with the color red, for example, now we only have our white squares visible. From this point, you can add a color overlay. So solid color here, I can choose a blue. Let's say if I set this background back to black again, then I'm going to set my color fill to darken. And there we go, now the white values have been replaced. So you can play around with these, you can add a gradient map. Now this effect is amazing for Brutalist design because this grid look, where it's just squares, fits really well into the Brutalist style, as well as these kind of big, bold image effects with intricate details. So let's move on to our second one. Now the second effect we're going to be creating here is a scanline effect. Now this is very simple in the filter gallery. So if you get your image selected, and you come up to filter and filter gallery. Now the effect I'm looking for is halftone patterns. So you come into the sketch folder and select halftone pattern here. You're now going to have a few options on the right hand side here. So you've got size, contrast, and pattern type. Now you want the pattern type to be online, and I'm going to change the size to around 4 or 5, and then you can play around with the contrast based on the image you're using at the moment. Now I want quite a lot of the visible black lines going across. So you see as I increase this contrast here, the black lines are hidden a little bit. So I'm going to reduce this to maybe about 24. Then I'm going to hit the plus again to create a duplicate. Now with this, you can also implement another pattern type. So if I was to select circle here, you can see the effect that it creates. And when combined, these can work really nicely together. For the moment, I'm going to stick it to a line, and then I'm going to change the values. So if I set this size to 4 and reduce the contrast a bit, or maybe put it up slightly, and about there is good for me. Now I'm going to press the plus one more time, and I'm going to look down for the texture folder and select grain. Now from the grain tab, you can select your intensity and your contrast. I'm going to leave them at 50 and 50 here. You can also play around with your grain type if you wanted a different kind of pattern. I'm going to stick with regular. Now once I've hit OK, to finish this effect off, we're going to come down to adjustments and threshold. Now this threshold is going to hide and reveal the dark and light areas, so you can balance it how you would like it. Now this works really well with the grain because it creates this kind of distressed look across all of the white areas. So play around with this balance and see what kind of scanline effects you can create. Now because this is in the filter gallery, you can always go back and change your line type. So for example, I'm going to change both of these to circle and then select OK here. And now with this threshold, we've got this nice spiral effect going across the image. From this point, you can add color with a gradient map. So if I come onto the gradient map down here in my adjustments, and I'm going to scroll through just a few color presets just to show you some options that you can create. Now GO-TOs are amazing for this because simply it's in black and white. So anything with multiple colors is not going to show. So I've got a whole bunch of GO-TOs here just to show you as an example. So now for the third effect. Now for our third effect that is arguably the most essential of any Brutalist design effect is going to be Xerox Threshold. So with my image here, I'm going to come down to my adjustments and add a threshold similarly to how we did in our previous effect. Now I'm going to adjust this how I like, but the key of this effect here, even though it's so simple, is the grain. So now With this image selected so that I input this layer above, I'm going to come to adjustments and solid color, and I'm going to type in the hex code 808080. The reason I do this is because this is a 50% gray value, so this is going to apply to all tones across the image. So with this color fill, I'm going to convert this to a smart object, and I'm going to come up to filter and camera raw filter. Now from here, you're going to see this effects tab on the right hand side, so I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to drop down on this grain tab here as well. Now I'm going to set the grain to 100. I'm also going to set the size to 100 and the roughness to 100. Now this is an example of a heavy, thick grain rather than a smaller, finer one. So I'm going to hit OK here. And now as this is below the threshold, you're only going to see it as white and black. So now if I set this layer mode to overlay and then turn the threshold back on, if I hide and reveal this noise layer, you're going to see how much detail is brought out from using this. Now this is the most simple effect of them, but it works so well and it's so adaptable with the amount of noise you use. So for example here, if I was to create a duplicate using Command J, so much more detail in the image gets revealed. And you can keep doing this till you get the noise value that you want. This is amazing for vintage graphics and obviously brutalist pieces of duotone or monochromatic colors. So now from this point with my noise, I'm just going to remove one of these layers and I'm going to settle for 3 of the noise layers. Now also with this, you can come back into the camera raw filter and you can change the size of the noise. So if I was to change this down to 20 and hide and reveal this layer, that's going to implement a different noise value. So play around with the size and the roughness. And now from this point above the threshold layer, I can add a gradient map. And once again, just cycle through some of these duotone options. Now with duotone being a really common standard in brutalist design work, threshold is such a great adjustment layer to use in these pieces. And there we go, that's 3 simple brutalist effects for you to use in your own work. Now, if you found this video useful, I upload twice a week on this channel, and there's going to be another video just here that YouTube thinks you need to see, so go ahead and watch that, and I'll see you over there.